Tell us briefly about the Dru Na Gu history, religious and spiritual aspects related to Bhutan.
Regarding Dru Na Gu, as far as my experience is concerned and the amount of time I spent working with it, it dates back to almost since my childhood, because I learned about the Dru Na Gu from my grandmother, from my mother. So these were all recipes that used to be cooked in the house. So that's how I got to learn about all this. And also I traveled extensively in the interiors of the country. So my interest was basically like I was very passionate about food and how food was produced and how it evolved and all that. Because my grandmother basically comes from the Lower King. So there they would eat a lot of this ancient food, the Dru Na Gu that was grown. And rice was very scarce, so they were not growing too much of rice, so they were eating more of the Dru Na Gu. So that's how I learned about the recipes from my grandmother. And fortunately, like I had a long relationship with her because she lived for 110 years. In the western part of the country, like we would see a lot of rice being consumed. But in the eastern and into the interiors of part of the country, like eastern part, central part, we would see a lot of more of this minor cereals being used in their daily food. For example, in the east, a lot of corn flakes, corn granules, corn grits, they would be cooked as a main meal. So I learned about all this throughout my travels.
And Dru Na Gu is also used for religious purpose in Bhutan, and then it is also kind of revered as a special cereals. Since you are very passionate about food in Bhutan, you have done your research also. So if you could tell us religious aspects also associated with Dru Na Gu.
I am not very conversant about the religious context with Dru Na Gu. But then when in detail, but then what I learned from my forefathers, what I learned from religious people, religious heads, through my interactions with them. So I think Dru Na Gu played a very significant role in our daily lives, in the Bhutanese daily lives. During one of my interactions, I learned that there's many theories, but there is one theory where it says that it was Lam Dukpakile who brought Dru Na Gu into the country, So during his travels, he would carry a pouch where he had all these cereals and grains in his bag. So wherever he went, he would just throw it, spread it out over the place where he was standing, and then he would pray, and then he would bless and say, may you grow in this area. So whichever place had that particular grains and cereals, I believe that's where it thrived, where it started growing. So that could be the reason also, maybe like why in certain parts there's so much intensity of certain kind of cereals. In some parts there's like Bhutan area, there's so much of buckwheat, it's a buckwheat area. So in the subtropical areas, you see the minor cereals like the millet, the amaranth and all that stuff. So that is one theory, one aspect which I heard. I think the terrain and the climate also played a lot in how these cereals were cultivated. These minor cereals, the Dru Na Gu especially, minus the rice, I think it thrived in all types of soil, They were grown in places, they grew in places where it did not require rich fertile soil. Like they were not irrigation intensive, not labor intensive. And most of these cereals, especially if you see the quinoa form, like now it's known as quinoa, but we had those species also back those days. So the millet, the cereals, that if you eat it, like it is a bit bitter, you eat it with a cover. So it's bitter. So I think that's how it got saved from the birds. It got saved from the rats, because it's not very, like when you eat it on its own, it's not very palatable, you know. So it was easy to grow, like and it grew into all types of climate, all types of soil. So that's how I think it was easy for people to manage back then. So when it comes to rice, like rice was not grown widely by the poorer section of the society, like who could not afford it, because it was, as I said, it's irrigation intensive, requires a lot of manpower. So it was the like a luxury. It was a luxury to have rice, you know. So mostly it would be the richer families who had huge land holdings who would grow the rice because they had the manpower and all that. So, but it's such an irony now, like it's so ironical that this poor man's food has become superfood nowadays, you know. And then the rice now is considered very like, if taken in large quantities, not healthy, you know. So it's so like interesting that how that twist has come, that the whole thing has overturned, you know. So now, like I think it's in demand. There's all this Dru Na Gu is in demand, you know. So people want it, they eat it, and I think it is also like. And then when it comes to the daily, like I mean, religious aspects, it was offered on ceremonial occasions, you know. We would, whenever there was a religious ceremony being performed, so this Dru Na Gu was a requirement, because when you like chase the evil spirits away from the during the ritual, mostly it's done to remove bad energy, chase the evil spirits that is disturbing the environment of the house. So for that, to see them off, you know, this Dru Na Gu would be offered to them, saying, now you leave, you know, please take this offering with you, you know, and leave us in peace. So Dru Na Gu was like kind of a commodity that was very, very essential in religious ceremonies. And then also it was also used in making especially the millet, the wheat, the barley, corn, you know, they were used in making brews also, you know. We would do like ara, singchang, bangchang. So they were used for all these brews. And then there's also the ara would also be used as for religious purpose, you know. So the ara would be used for serkim and all that, no, offering to the gods, and then also the energy outside. So that's how like the religious aspect, the spirituality aspect, and then also the social everyday thing aspect. That's how the Dru Na Gu was used. Through my experience, I found that the Dru Na Gu, Dru Na Gu as such, Dru Na Gu means 9 grains, 9 cereals, you know. So or 9 grains. So the use, the ingredients varied from place to place. So, like for example, normally Dru Na Gu would include rice, wheat, barley, maize, mustard, amaranth, buckwheat, sweet buckwheat, bitter buckwheat, and then some would also add soybeans, you know, lentils, soybeans. Some included that. So that was how like. So it varied. In some places, people add mustard seeds, and some would add dal also in the Dru Na Gu. But nowadays, when you see in the shops the package, the Dru Na Gu package that they sell, you will see a lot of things. Like you will see the dal, different types of dal. You will also see the soybeans besides the normal, the actual Dru Na Gu. You know, basically, these are the I would say the ingredients that comprised the Dru Na Gu.
And if you could also tell us about the benefits, health benefits of consuming Dru Na Gu.
Like I said earlier, Dru Na Gu minus the rice was a poor man's food, you know, in the past. Rice was a luxury for them. But if you see the health benefits, because these cereals, like especially the millet, quinoa, the amaranth, barley, and all that stuff. So they are full of rich nutrients, and very high fiber. So if you ate the wheat in a powdered form, so made it into balls with adding some kind of liquid or water, or it would keep you full for a very long period of time. It expands in your stomach. So that's why, like a lot of people who travel into very high altitudes, they normally carry this, we call it akha, wheat powder. So kapchi. So they would make it into, like, prepare it into balls, add something there, sugar or something like that. So that will help them sustain for a very long time when they travel into the mountains. So likewise, it was also used on a daily basis, because then people had to work very hard into the fields and all that. So it had to sustain them. So it gave you a lot of energy. It gave a lot of energy, and then they could, and it kept them alert. They were not feeling sleepy. So it helped in their daily activities. But when it comes to rice is more sedative. It makes you sleep. Yes. Like if you consume large quantities, then it becomes very heavy, and then and it has a kind of a sedative kind of component, so it makes you sleep. So during my interactions with one of my one of my friends who was quite well versed in this area, he did mention that when you grow rice, because rice is loved by insects also, so there's a lot of insects infesting the paddy, So I don't know, like, whether it makes sense, but he was saying maybe that's the reason why we feel so, like, sleepy when you eat rice. And so, but I found that quite interesting, because much later what happened was, with the imports opening, the trade opening, a lot of rice started coming into the country. So people found it easier to eat rice, and then they started slowly, like, losing out on the traditional foods that we were eating, the healthy foods that we were eating. So started more into the rice. So I think that's how, like, a lot of health conditions also evolved, and especially with the new gadgets that were coming in, the rice cookers, the curry cookers, which made life much more simpler. Because before we would cook the rice in water, boil it in water, and then strain the water off. So when you strain the water off, a lot of the starch, the sugar and everything is removed. So, like, it was, I would say it was healthy, But now, like, in the rice cookers, it is cooked with the starch, everything. Yes. It's ready to eat. So I guess that's how it makes it much more unhealthy to eat a lot of rice. I have nothing against rice. I'm a rice lover. I would eat it as much as I can. But then I think at times you have to be very conscious about.
And since you are a food entrepreneur yourself, and you have worked with Dru Na Gu as well in your factory. So where do you collect your Dru Na Gus from?
When I first started venturing into in food business, and I wanted to start a restaurant whereby we would focus only on authentic Bhutanese food. We needed ingredients, and it was quite difficult to source those ingredients. So initially I started through my relatives, farmers who were working in the villages. So I would source from King, I would source from the east, from all over the country. And it was all through my relatives and my friends and their relatives that we got the ingredients. So initially, like, they would give us, because it was meant for their daily intake. So they had just enough for their own consumption. So they would share a little bit of everything for me. And that's how we started our restaurant in Kawajangsa. It's known as the Folk Heritage Restaurant. So there we wanted to showcase Bhutanese food culture and also only serve Bhutanese cuisine, traditional cuisine. So like our Dru Na Gu came from all parts of the country, like from the east we would get the corn, we would get the amaranth, we would get a lot of all the stuff. Then from the Punakha area we would get our millet, and then from Ha and Bhutan we would get our buckwheat. From Daifam we would get our like maybe sweet buckwheat. So I mean it covered the whole of the country. So initially it was in small packages, but as farmers began to feel confident that there was a market, then they started growing more. So, and as they started growing more, then I could not use all of them in my restaurant, and I could not say no to them also, because I didn't want to discourage them from growing. So we had to then diversify. That's how we started making in products, processed products. So one thing led to the other. So anyway, like life is full of surprises, it is an adventure. So you make one thing and then from there you get another thing. So there's always something to look forward to.
Most of us, generally, most Bhutanese, we consume a lot of rice. And I think most of us are not aware of the recipes also, like Dru Na Gu. So if you could, as a food expert, if you could suggest what else can you make from Dru Na Gu?
I think I'm not a food expert, by the way. Like it's just that it's the experiences that I've gone through that I gained knowledge along the way. So you can make, I mean, with Dru Na Gu, there's diverse opportunities, areas where you can use them, like now whatever imports are coming inside the country, like essential commodities in terms of food, I think you can make everything the same way, like for example the noodles are coming in, we can make noodles out of them. The cereals, breakfast cereals are coming in, we can make breakfast cereals. I mean, we can substitute all those imports with what we have just now. If you use the resources meaningfully in a sustainable manner, I think we can replace a lot of the imported food. Substitution can happen, it should happen. So, and also it's the government policy, and also I think His Majesty's very keen desire that our people should be self-sufficient. We should be using our own products, our own local resources. So that way I think every Bhutanese citizen, we should strive towards that, to help achieve His Majesty's vision, of a self-sufficient, small, compact country. So, here, like with the wheat, whatever things we make from the imported wheat, we can make, like cookies, chapatis, or whatever we can make, and it's not impossible. We can use all those products. With the corn, we should not just resort to making ara and all that, but with those we can make cornflakes. With the buckwheat, you can eat it as a groat, buckwheat groats. You can eat it like a rice. If you don't want to eat a rice or anything at all, and if you just want to stick to buckwheat groats and eat it like a rice, it can be eaten like that. So likewise, all the other cereals, the quinoa, you can eat it like a rice. It's just that the way it's cooked, I mean, if you eat it along with the skin, then of course you will not like it, because then it's bitter. It contains, outer covering contains a component called saponin. So saponin is slippery and it's bitter, so you have to wash that off. So people have to we have to educate people how to eat them, So maybe the older generation, they are so used to eating it with the skin, the cover, everything, because that was their way of life, and they are so used to, they have developed that acquired taste for that. So for them it's not a problem. But for a younger generation, if you make them eat it in that form, they will not like it. No, outright they will reject it. But if we can process them and make it palatable, I'm sure everybody will like to eat it. Even when, if we can start with our children, you know, things can be like hidden. So mix all the cereals, the quinoa and all that with the rice, a little bit of cereal with the rice and all that. So children will eat them, you know, if you disguise them. So that's how I think we should go about encouraging people to use our own local products. You know?
And a very personal question, do you have a personal favorite recipe from the Dru Na Gu?
I personally like the millet, and we also eat a lot of millet, because this was a kind of mainstream food in my family because of my grandmother and my mother. They love it so much, and they grew up eating it. So that's why, like, it also became a mainstream food in my family. So millet, you can powder it, and then you make it into a dough. Cook it in hot water, water, and then you make it into a dough. And once it's cooked, then you break it up, and you can use butter, you can use gruel, you can use gravy or chilies or paste, or whatever. It goes with anything, you know, anything that's a little bit savory or spicy. Or so personally, millet is my favorite, and also for me it has a very spiritual significance, because I was told that Lord Buddha used to eat it 2,500 years ago. So people were the people of the area where Buddha lived. So a lot of people were growing them and eating them, you know. So that has a very religious significance. And then the barley also has a very religious significance for me. I like barley also. So it has a religious significance, because somewhere I read that when Buddha achieved his enlightenment, there were 3 travelers who offered the barley sweet balls, you know, it's barley, it's like sweets, to Buddha, and they were made from barley with honey and with honey and brown sugar. So it was mixed like that. So I tried to look for the recipe, and so we tried to make it here, you know. So it was called madhupindika, the barley balls. Like certain foods, no, date back so to the ancient times. So if Buddha ate millet, why should we not eat? You know, we have to eat that, because if Buddha achieved enlightenment using millet, then I'm sure we as Bhutanese, who are so connected to Buddhism, to Buddha and all, no, we should also try to eat this food, because there is significance, you know. It is, and people who meditate, they also eat a lot of millet, you know, because I think it clears your energy, it makes you alert, it helps you in your meditation, you don't go hungry easily. So there's a lot of virtues in the goodness of the millet.
And as somebody who's very passionate about food, and somebody who has been in the industry, food industry, for quite some time, what would be your advice for our viewers?
For our viewers, like especially for those people in the food industry, I think they should keep on working at it, you know. Yes, times are difficult, it's very challenging. It's a very, very challenging journey, but finally you'll reach there. And those consumers, I would please change to honest food. Please change to food that are very natural, simple, which our forefathers were using, and which balanced out everything, you know, within nature. And then this, our own local food represent a lot of our simplicity, generosity. So I think we should appreciate all those qualities, and then maybe for the implementers, for the regulators, I think we should see that this our own local foods can be a source of nutrition for places where there are feeding programs, places for where there are for good diet and nutrition, like the hospitals, and also for people like in the monastic centers. So these are places like where we can very confidently and very intelligently use these products, And also I think we can also come up these products, because they are so versatile, they have long shelf life because of their nutrition. I think people these can be used in areas where there are emergencies, maybe where there are disasters. So these can substitute, instead of just carrying packets of noodles, instead of just carrying packaged food and all that. So we can use these products in all these areas, and then maybe the slowly the food industry will be producing our own food products, natural, honest products, and then substitute, whatever is becoming mainstream food, I think we can substitute. So this is my earnest request to everybody, that let's look into our own resources, let's work on our own food, let's support our farmers, and help them grow, and at the same time help them use it, in a very sustainable manner.
Yes. Thank you very much for your time and for this enriching conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.